Good morning. Hi, everybody. Hope you can find this video for Coffee with the Pastor episode. I think I put 34, something huge like that. Hey, I see we got a couple people on that have found it. I wonder if there's a way. Hey, Tiffany. I bet Christopher is there too. Hey, Lespers. Who else is here? Say good morning in the comments or bad morning, whatever you want. I don't care. Say something. Hey, Joyce and David. Hope y'all are well. Missed seeing you last night at the small group we did, but I know Jana said she stopped by and you guys had a great talk. So hey, gonna wait about a minute or so till we get more people jumping on here before I get going. Happy Friday to you. I hope it's been a good week. It's been a busy week for me, between small group, between doing coffee with pastor a couple times, doing an Air Force newsletter for my troops, a lot of projects and papers coming due on Tuesday for me. I'm doing my best. Hey, Tammy's here. I met her last night in the small group. Hey, Tammy. Um, let me show off my shirt while I'm waiting. This is from the unit that I'm a part of in the Air Force Reserve, the 433rd Airlift Wing in San Antonio, and it's also known as the Alamo Wing. These are my people. I love being a part of this unit down in San Antonio. So right now we have a handful of folks that are deployed up north to New York and New Jersey, doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists up there taking care of COVID patients. So sending them my love. We actually sent them, Heather made them several loaves of banana bread, had and drew them a picture. I threw a book in, and we mailed them a package earlier this week. They should have it by now. So needed a clone last night. Hey, Tori. Yeah, so Tiffany said, looking forward to hearing more about the Air Force. Yeah, as I put this on this morning, I thought of you some. Tiffany, I'm trying to recruit her to come to the 433rd. Tori says my brother is finishing his master's in social work, so he gets it. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Who else is on this morning? I wanted to talk this morning. We've been talking some this week about some of the really influential books and people in our lives. Earlier, when I did the coffee with the pastor, I think is it on Monday, I talked about Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book, his letters and papers from prison. I'm always fascinated by stuff like that. It's at the end of his life. What does he have to lose? He's in a concentration camp. You get a lot of honesty from him. And I shared just some stuff from that book that was really formative for me. Fran shared some stuff. Aurelia shared an amazing coffee with the pastor yesterday. I encourage you to go back and watch that one if you can. I wanted to share another book this morning that was really formative for me in my life. I'm going to be reading from some notes, but I'll try to stay engaged here as well. But you can help us be engaged by adding comments. Send the comments, please, and I'll try to keep up with them. But in the summer of 2015, so 5 years ago, I spent 6 weeks in South Carolina on military duty. I was actually taking a course. And in my downtime, I went to a local state park in the fragrant pine forest of South Carolina. Never hung out anywhere like that before. And so every chance I could get, I would drive 20 minutes away, go to the pine forest, and as much as I could, just try to take the forest into myself so that when I left, I was taking it with me. It was a really, really wonderful time in life for me. Hey, Clark, glad you're here. While I was there, I read a lot of Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry, poet, activist, author. And in fact, look, you can see I saved, I would pick up pine needles off the forest floor and I would use them as bookmarks on some of my favorite poems, and for a while they smelled. Unfortunately, the fragrance is gone now. I'll get back there one day. We have family in North Carolina, so we get over there every other year or so. But I read a lot of Wendell Berry, and I also read Paul Tillich, theologian from last century. He died like in the 1960s. Really influential for a lot of people, but he wrote this great book called The Courage to Be. The Courage to Be. And I was working through that book, kind of a famous book last century, and I want to share some of the quotes and thoughts from that book. So first, number one, Tillich said that apart from God, nothing is permanent and guaranteed. Not us, not our earth, not our nation, not anything. We, he said, are contingent beings. We are not necessary. The earth would be just fine without us. Thank you very much. Creation does not need us. The universe does not need us. And in fact, we can disappear and the universe wouldn't give one single care. It would just continue to do what it's doing, expanding, growing, shedding its light, sharing its elements. We are contingent beings, and we need to take ourselves out of the center of the universe and practice some existential humility, he would say. This is the human situation. So cheers. Happy Friday. I hope you like that encouraging message so far. We are contingent beings was the first thing he said. And then number two, we are beings who live with the constant threat of non-being. We are beings who live with the constant threat of non-being, which is to say, the threat of death, the threat of non-existence, the threat of being gone and forgotten. We might also say, if we extrapolate that a little bit, we live constantly with the threat of being ridiculed or being made fun of or being shown to be weak or whatever. And all these things stir up that fear in us of the threat of non-being. We live with the threat of being abandoned. We live constantly with the threat of being minimized to nothing, whatever it may be. I'm getting a little distracted as I look at the video behind me. I don't know. Oh, they're watching funny cat videos back there. So if you're not enjoying all this Tillich stuff, just watch the cat videos instead. And they're being quiet, so I'm kind of grateful for that. All right, I hope you're tracking with me so far. So we're about to get away from some of this dense, nerdy stuff and talk about why all this matters. But he said we constantly live with the threat of non-being. And he said we have two choices of how we respond to this. He said our first option is just to avoid all the ways that life asks us to be, all the ways that life asks us to be present, to be responsible, to be an active agent in our existence, to be love to ourselves and to others. We avoid all the ways that life asks us to be finite and limited and stop acting like we have omnipotence. That's one option, is we avoid all of that. We ignore it. We act like we don't have any of that responsibility. We don't have any limitations. And the problem then is we are avoiding non-being by avoiding being. This is neurotic, he says. We do this in a million ways every day. These are all the big and the little things that we do to build up our ego and our status in the world. We build huge monuments to ourselves. We dominate others, or maybe we rely on authority rather than thinking for ourselves. We numb ourselves with pleasure and busyness. We hoard vast sums of power and money so we can try to keep the threat of non-being at bay or at arm's length, but it never works. It's always with us. Again, this is the human condition. Of course, this is the condition of every creature. We happen to have a brain that can think about it. We happen to have a brain that can understand that. And that's what causes us to get tripped up. We then begin to act in all these ways. We dominate others out of fear of our non-being. We try to control everything in life, but we just can't. Let me see. These are some of the ways we respond to our fears. What about you? How do you respond to the fear of non-being, this threat of to your existence that we live with every day? What are some of the crazy things you do that get in the way of your true existence, your truest self? The other option, Paul Tillich says, if we don't want to run away from our being, if we don't want to run away from the fear of non-being, is we can practice what he called the courage to be. This is, of course, where he gets the title of the book from, The Courage to Be. What a beautiful phrase. What is the courage to be, though? Well, in the whole book, my favorite line, and this really is what has impacted me so much over the past 5 years and shaped so much of who I am as a person, as a pastor, as a leader. But he said, the courage to be is the courage to accept oneself as accepted in spite of being unacceptable. Let me read that again. The courage to be is the courage to accept oneself as accepted. You are accepted in spite of all the reasons you can come up with that you are unacceptable. In other words, there are innumerable reasons for you to reject me. There are innumerable reasons for God to reject me. I am well acquainted with a lot of those in my own mind. And yet, I practice the courage to be when I put myself out there for you to accept me, nevertheless. We might say this to ourselves. Matthew, there are a million reasons for you to reject me right now. I'm putting myself out there for you to accept me. We might say this to others, those we live with, our neighbor, whoever it may be, just the other in society. There are a million reasons for you to reject me. I'm putting myself out here for you to accept me in spite of all those things, trusting that you will. Or we might say it to God. So let me talk a little bit more about the courage to be. The courage to be is the courage to participate in something which transcends yourself. A lot of us do that through this community right here. A lot of us do that in a million other ways. The courage to be is the courage to live life without trying to control everything through calculation and management. When we try to control everything in our life, we are living out of the fear of non-being. We are not practicing the courage to be. We practice the courage to be when we accept, I can't control everything around me. I can only respond to it with love, with creativity, with courage. Tillich says, I'm really alive. I am truly alive when I accept that right there. I can't control everything around me. I can only respond to it with love, courage, and creativity. The courage to be is the courage to accept that we are inevitably guilty because we cannot be perfect in our relationships to ourselves, our fellow creatures, and God. The courage to be is the courage to own that guilt, to work through it in relationship with the other, and to stay in the relationship. If you can do all this, congratulations, you are practicing true being. Mary, I appreciate your comments. This is your life story. You say, I can identify. Yeah. Okay, thank you for sharing that. The courage to be is the courage to have relationships based on mutuality and equality and interdependence. Relationships where we need each other, rather than relationships based on having power and dominance over each other. Clark says, darn, one more book I have to get. The courage to be is the courage to have relationships of reciprocity, relationships where we are equals, relationships where I need you and you need me, and our lives are woven together in healthy ways, not in codependent ways, in healthy ways. When we have those kinds of relationships, we are practicing true being. We are having courage, he says. However, when our relationships are relationships of dominance and power over others, we're not practicing true being. We're running away from the threat of non-being, he would say. The courage to be is the courage to accept that one is finite and limited and stop living as if you have omnipotence or all the power. Only God does that, and sometimes I question what omnipotence looks like from God's perspective. I don't even think God gets what he wants. And I tell my kids this all the time. Nobody gets what they want all the time, not even God. That's part of my theology, at least. The courage to be is the courage to create. The courage to be is the courage to create. That takes some real self affirmation of your being, is when you create something, when you add beauty to the world. You are putting yourself out there, because that can be rejected. It can be stomped on. It can be trashed and thrown away or ridiculed. But you are saying, look, world, here I am. I am showing up in all of my being because I have created something to add beauty to this world. What do my notes actually say? Let me see. The courage to be is the courage to create. Oh, yeah. Several years ago, I built a little free library. There's a little free library movement around the world, and it was in the form of a 4-foot robot that I concreted into my front yard by the sidewalk because I wanted it to be this amazing little piece of art that also was a blessing to the kids in my neighborhood. So we filled his belly with books, and they would come by, and it was this robot made out of junk I found in my garage. And stuff I found on the curb and old car parts and things like that. He was a really good looking robot. The first few weeks, people would stop in front of my house and they would ask me if it was trash that I meant to throw out on the curb. They're like, is this trash? Are you throwing this away? And I'm like, no, it's my robot that I planted in the front of my yard. What's so hard for you to understand about that? And I think the only reason I got away with it is because we didn't have a homeowners association who told me, don't build robots out of junk and stick them in your front yard. So this was a piece of artwork, beauty that I'm trying to add to the world. And people thought it was weird, and people thought it was trash, and people thought it was goofy. But all the kids in the neighborhood loved Bobot. That was his name, Bobot. I say was. Unfortunately, the weather got to him, and I took him down 2 months ago. He lasted like 4 years or so, but he was in really rough shape. Maybe I'll rebuild it into something else. But the courage to be is the courage to take the risk to do something unique and creative and beautiful in this world that adds beauty to it. And every time you do that, you are practicing true being, he would say. The courage to be is the courage to practice joy. The courage to practice joy. He writes, joy is the emotional expression of the courageous yes to your own being. It's so easy to practice cynicism and stoicism in this world. What really takes courage is to practice joy. The courage to be is the courage to be a part of Jesus' prayer, where Jesus says, let your kingdom come and let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, it's the courage to say, I'm going to make earth look more like heaven. I'm going to do that hard work, even though it feels like the entire world is against me. Even though it feels like this is made out of paper mache and it's going to get destroyed next time it rains, it doesn't matter. I'm going to practice making this world look more like heaven. That is the courage to be, the courage of actually being alive. So I found my notes. I saved notes from that book. I didn't own the book. I was borrowing it from somebody. And so I took meticulous notes, and I found my notes as I was getting ready for this coffee with the pastor. And in my notes, I wrote, what is courage for me? And here's what I put. Courage for me is the courage to be held in spite of mistrusting the holder. To put myself out there and say, I'm going to let you hold me. I'm going to let you care for me and love me. Number 2, the courage to be is the courage to accept myself as acceptable in spite of being unacceptable. The courage to be is the courage to live in ambiguity and let go of certainty. This has always been a challenge for me. How can I let go of certainty? The courage to be is the courage to not live in hierarchy and power structures, but to step out of hierarchy and power structures and have relationships based on mutuality and equality. The courage to be is the courage for me to love and to be loved, even though I may be doing it all wrong. This is the courage to be. What about you? What would courage for you look like based on everything you've been hearing me say and the wheel spinning in your own mind? I think about our community of peace. I'm wrapping it up here. This is getting long. I'm sorry. Thinking about our community, Peace of Christ community, what is courage for us? What does it look like for us to really be alive and to affirm our being and say, world, we are here. In spite of the fact we may be doing everything wrong, in spite of the fact that you may reject us, in spite of the fact that it's not politically right or expedient for us to live like this. We are here. We are showing you. I wrote, these are new notes, not what I wrote in 2015. The courage to be for the community of peace might be the courage to push boundaries and conventions, even though we might be wrong. We might be interpreting scripture wrong. We might be loving people wrong, whatever it may be, but we are showing up and trying to practice that courage in spite of the fact that we are inevitably going to miss the mark and be wrong. The courage to be for the peace of Christ community is the courage to set love as the guiding principle for how we understand and interpret Jesus and God and the scriptures. We are saying this is how we are practicing courage of being in this world. We may be wrong, but we are leading with love and letting love be our deciding hermeneutic or deciding principle for how we interpret everything else, rather than dogma or fear of hell or judgment or moralistic rules, whatever that may be. The courage to be within the community of the peace of Christ is the courage to take risks. It's the courage to apply our faith and theology to the world around us and talk about the structures of society around us and overlay it with theology and say, let's interpret those in terms of what love looks like and doesn't look like. What about you? Any other ideas about what the courage to be means for you? Any questions about this crazy concept, the courage to be, being, the threat of non-being? Any thoughts about any of this that you want to share with our group this morning? Post them in the comments. I encourage you, ask God, what are all the ways that I run away from being in my own life, in my world, in my community around me? What are the ways that I practice non-being, that I let fear lead me so that I run away from being? I like how Tammy put the courage to be silent in a culture. Yeah. So the courage to be silent in a culture loud with opinion. Courage to speak up in a culture of voiceless, marginalized. Beautiful. Courage to know the difference of when to speak and when to be silent. Beautiful. Thank you for that, Tammy. I agree. I agree with all of that. Okay, we're at 23 minutes. I better go. Please continue to put comments here. We'll all interact with them. I hope you have a fantastic Friday and a great weekend. Reminder, we do host a series of Facebook Live sessions for our Sunday morning service starting at 10 a.m. I hope you're following our page if you want to see announcements for that. And then we don't have coffee with Pastor on Monday. We'll be back on Tuesday through Friday for more of this. Have a happy Friday, everybody. We'll talk to you later.